one due to the weather and maybe due to internet connections and a number of other things, but glad you could all make it for today. We have a few things on the agenda that are kind of time sensitive that we can get through, hopefully in an hour. And Emily, do I have to call the roll and have people signify?
Yes, please.
Well, then I'm going to do that. Ann Gravitt. I don't see Ann on the call right now. Bob Salinger. Bob either right at the moment. Lori Stegman.
Yes, here, but I apologize. I have to leave at 4:30.
Okay. Corky Collier.
Here.
Dave Ripma.
Here.
Shirley Craddock.
Here.
Eric Molander.
Here.
James Allison.
Here.
John Nihiyama.
Here.
John L. Bell. Mary Helen Kincaid.
Here.
Paul Lumley. Steve Fancher.
Here.
Tanny Stephenson. Are you on here, Tanny?
I saw him on the call.
Okay.
He's there.
I'm
there.
Hi, Tanny.
Tony DeFalco.
Here.
And our new member is Eric Mueller.
Here.
Eric, do you want to say a few words to the group just by way of introduction?
Sure. What would you like me to say?
You're representing the city of Fairview, but you work for the city of Troutdale. Is that right?
Yes, I've been a resident of Fairview since 2011 and reside in MCDD right along Sandy Boulevard and very, I guess, southern edge of the zone there in Fairview, along with my 196 other homeowners in the Fairview Terrace Homeowners Association. But I drive down Halsey down to the city of Troutdale for my day job, where for the last 12 years I've been the finance director for the city of Troutdale. And Mayor Cooper of Fairview reached out to me several weeks ago and indicated that the council wanted to see about making a change and wondered if I would be willing to participate, since the board was going to be moving into the revenue model development, and thought that with my background and so forth, that might be of some benefit. So here I am.
Oh, great. We're happy to have you. Appreciate you spending the time, and I'm confident that your background is going to be really important for us as we move forward here next few years. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So in terms of process, as part of the statute, Fairview has selected him to represent them. And then as according to the statute, any vacancy is filled by a majority vote of the remaining members. And so Fairview's requesting that you all sort of affirm him in the seat. And so now would be a good time for a motion to appoint him to the board, and then we can make that formal.
So entertain a motion to appoint Eric to the board representative.
I move appointment of Eric Mueller as Fairview's representative.
Thank you, Dave.
This is Corky. I'll second that.
And I got a second from Corky. And do I need to do a roll call, or can we do just a voice vote?
I'm comfortable with the voice vote. It's just a majority. And so that's fine with me.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, Eric, the railroad has left the station here. You're on board. Appreciate it.
Lock the door. The doors are locked.
Okay, are we gonna put up the agenda today? And or we don't have to, but what's next? Because
I can do.
I don't have it in front of me.
I can do so. The next item, well, typically we have an opening for public comment if there's anyone on the line that's interested in public comment.
Okay, is there anybody here to comment from the public? And we'll try and check again at the end in case someone joins us.
Then the next order of business is selection of vice chair with Mike Weatherby leaving the board. That leaves a vacant space for vice chair, and it sounds like we're going to need someone to preside over an upcoming meeting, so it's a good time to check in and select someone to fill that role for the rest of the year.
You know, we haven't had a lot of time to have a lot of backroom chatter on this, so I guess I'm open to nominations for the vice chair or a statement of interest even. Steve?
I will volunteer to put myself up for vice chair if nobody else is doing so.
Thank you for that. Corky?
No, I was actually looking at Steve thinking, oh, he'd be good for that.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair or volunteers? Seeing none, I think we have a resolution, do we not, that has a motion for that?
We do. This is going to be the let me pull it up. It's long for you. Let's see.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Here we go. Thank you. So I'd entertain a motion to approve resolution R 2021-03-01, appointing Steve Fancher as the vice chair for the district.
So moved.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Dave. I'll second that one again. Dave and I are on a roll here.
Dave moved and Corky seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, Steve, you're on, buddy. Kelly, I think you're next.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to present you a set of personal services contracting rules. The Oregon Public Contracting Code allows you to have special procurement rules surrounding personal services, which are different from your run-of-the-mill goods and services. So things that may, like the name implies, may require a little bit more of a personal touch, or that you may want to have a little bit more flexibility in selection when you're looking at them. So who gets to approve these rules? The local contracting review board is the body that adopts contracting and procurement rules. That body also gets to make decisions about exemptions from the public bidding process. For example, if you wanted, or if staff were researching on a particular type of contract and they were to find out that really there's only one place where you can get it, that would be a sole source contract. And then there's other types of decisions that are delegated to that board through the public contracting code and other rules. And that differs from the approval of specific contracts, which is delegated to the governing body. So you, oops, got some feedback there. So you as the governing body have the authority to approve individual contracts, either through kind of a blanket process with your budget each year, and then delegating authority to the executive director or other staff to sign, or you can approve them individually as they come up, which is kind of how we've been doing our contracts with this board, just because we're kind of all learning together and getting our bearings. So today, what I've proposed are a set of these personal services contracting rules. It's not a full set of LCRB rules, which is what the current drainage districts have. which would include a lot more specifications about the types of procurements that can be done, how formal they need to be, when we need to check in with the LCRB, that sort of thing. This is very particular to personal services because we're going through an updating process with all the boards, and we're hoping to have a set of rules that is the same for all the districts, because right now we've got 6 boards, and it gets to be a lot if they're having to follow different contracting rules. So this set of rules contains some definitions, including a definition of personal services. And some examples of that include, well, let's see, specialized technical, creative, professional communication skills or talents, specialized knowledge, things like that. There's a few examples in the definition, including accountants, attorneys, appraisers, public relations or communications consultants, things like that, where you may want to be able to look at more than just a price or other restrictions that you would have to look at if you did not define personal services. So defining these types of services gives you some more flexibility in how we can go through this process, and the evaluation process that staff would go through to make a selection, and just give you greater overall flexibility in your procurements of this type. So later on, we would bring you a full set of LCRB rules that would encompass all the other things that I was talking about. But for now, we're just looking at this very specific set. And I believe we're looking at some accounting services to be procured this month. And so that's why this is timely, to make sure that we can procure those according to this set of rules that you have in your packet. Oh, and yes, a statement here that as we're going through the full set of LCRB rules, we're going to be looking at how to incorporate the MVV, excuse me, can you go back? That's not the right. Yeah, the MVV, the equity, and the environmental work that you've been that's in your statute, and figuring out how we're going to incorporate that into the LCRB. So we're going to try to be really thoughtful about that and bring you some proposals for LCRB rules later on. Any questions?
So Kelly, just for my own kind of edification here, this section of these rules, obviously about personal services, but this language is a lot of this language is boilerplate language out of Attorney General direction, is it not? And I don't know what the districts have had in the past.
Yeah, so a lot of what is in this set of rules is drawn from the model rules that the Attorney General puts together each year. We have added some flexibility in how we in what we define as personal services, because that's not defined in the model code. So that's up to the district. So we tried to look at things that would be useful to us in determining our personal services. But as you can see in some of the other pages, it refers back to a lot of these, the model rules. And then what the drainage districts use is a similar set of rules. And then as we go through the more standard procurement, you'll see a lot more of just kind of directly drawing in those model rules. And so I think the personal services is a little bit different because there's a lot more flexibility. But the future provisions will have a lot more drawing on the model code.
Thank you. Other questions for Kelly?
Kelly, this model still has all the standard covenants associated with making certain that there aren't conflicts of interest, correct?
That you're talking about conflicts for board members, or?
No, conflicts. So the informal selection process must solicit responses, but this is really up to the executive director to make the choice, right? But we still have the standard, no conflict of interest clauses that are in these model rules.
So yeah, to the extent that those are required by the statute, that would also be required here. So we can't change the statute or some of the model rules unless we're allowed to. And so we've been working really closely with our outside counsel to make sure that there's no conflicts there.
Okay, so basically, staff can't recommend somebody that's a former staff member and just say, we're going to hire this person because we think that that individual is most qualified.
No, so yeah, so the staff is required to put together a process ahead of time for how they're going to go about the procurement. And then to the extent that there is a conflict, whether it's with a staff or a board member or other participant, then that person would not participate in the decision making.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? If not, Emily, can you put up there we go. Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion, at least to the effect of the proposed one.
This is Shirley. I'll move to adopt resolution 2021-02-01 LCRB, adopting rules of procedure for the procurement of personal services contracts.
Is there a second?
And I'll second that.
So Shirley's moved and Corky is seconded. Any other discussion?
I'll just clarify really quick, Mike, that the governing body is the LCRB in this case by default. So that's you guys.
Any other comments? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. And what's next, Emily? Casey.
It's me. It is I. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here today to discuss and I hope adopt or approve a supplemental budget for fiscal year 2020-2021, current fiscal year. As you probably know, the LRC partners have voted back in November to approve sending $122,832 to the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District for the purpose of helping you be able to perform your duties this fiscal year. We didn't budget for that, but state budget law provides for a jurisdiction to adopt a supplemental budget to recognize unanticipated revenue, which this is, and appropriate it so you have the ability to spend it. A couple of little notes on that. We have notice provisions, which we have abided by. There is a public hearing required. So, Mr. Chair, when it gets to be time, you'll need to convene a public hearing. And the line items, the specific points of this are on page 3, the Exhibit A to the resolution saying the plan is to recognize the $122,832, spend $45,000 on utility rate development, $19,000, which is an error that I'll ask you to correct, on general consulting, and $24,000 on governance and legislative consulting, $15,000 on community outreach, and $20,000 on mission, vision, and values. Colin is here to discuss any of the points about the content of this. I'm mostly here to talk about the technical piece of it. There are 2 minor amendments that will need to be made on this thing because there are errors in the version that was submitted to you. The first is in the last whereas, which has the date of the meeting where we expected this to be adopted and not today's date. So if we could change February 16th, 2021 to March 1st, 2021 in the 2 places that it occurs in that last whereas, that would be nice. And the other one is in the, on page 3, the Exhibit A, saying where the money's going to go. We had a little back and forth about exactly how precise to be with this. We changed it to the 162,832 in every place but 2. Under the finance program, the general consulting line item should be 18,832, and the subtotal for the finance program, 63,832. The rest of the numbers are right, the totals are right. So after you're done with your discussion and your hearing, if you'd like to make those motions to clean up the errors in the resolution, that would be great. So with that, I'm available and Colin's available for questions if you have any.
Well, let's start with questions about the presentation as far as how it's presented with the changes that Casey has mentioned. And if there are any substantive questions of Colin, that would be appropriate now. So we'll take those questions if anyone has them.
I have one. Where did the 122, I mean, I see from the memo that it came from Lovey Ready, Columbia. Why was it unanticipated, or where did it come from?
There was some talk back in budget season that the LRC partners might or might not donate some money, grant some money, but it wasn't firm enough by any means, and it wasn't firmed up until later in this fiscal year to include it as a revenue that we expected to get or an amount back in the budget process. In the meantime, since you adopted your budget in June, the board kicked it around, I guess, and decided to let the new district have this amount of money out of the funds that they've raised from all the partners.
Okay, thanks.
So, Mr. Chair, will we
Go ahead.
also have to recognize a change due to the $500,000?
If there's $500,000 that comes in this fiscal year, yes, you would have to do that. If you were also going to spend it, if you just wanted to get it and put it in the bank, you wouldn't have to amend the budget.
Well, we've got, I think we have an issue with that, Casey, and that is a grant to be used in this biennium. And so we need to spend as much of that as we can. We can't just bank it and carry it over to the next biennium, I believe.
Our approach has, in response to that, Mike, our approach is to focus on the grant money where applicable and where we can apply it. There are certain places that we may not be able to apply it, and I'm going to refer you to Colin for some of those because he knows specifically what that grant dollars can be used for and what it can't be used for.
Well,
but it is clear the priority is to first focus on those grant dollars.
and I appreciate that. And that was my understanding also. The question from Eric, which I think is an appropriate one, is why isn't the 500 in this supplemental budget amendment?
The 500,000, or I guess 450,000 of that is actually in the JCA's budget. The grant revenue coming in from Business Oregon is actually a contract with the JCA, and it is similar to the LRC grant dollars in furtherance of the mission of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District. So the work against the grant is going to further the work of your board and district, but it is coming into the joint contracting authority of the Columbia Corridor Drainage Districts.
So is that clear as mud?
When the grant, when it was provided, was before this entity was established. It went to JCA because JCA was identified. And then if we had wanted to change it directly for this urban district, we would have had to get it approved in the legislature. And it was easier and less crazy to leave it within the JCA and spend it through the JCA. I think.
No, I think that makes sense. It just, it wasn't clear, I think, to everybody that that was the delineation between the original 40,000 from the districts,
Yep.
122 and change from the LRC IGA, which is included in this supplemental budget.
Correct.
The reason that the 500 is not in our budget is because the agreement, the grant agreement, is with the JCA, not with the Urban Flood Safety District. However, correct me, Peggotty, our IGA between the Urban Flood Safety District and the Joint Contracting Authority is that that money will be spent on behalf of our district.
That is correct. The way we established it is you took a bucket and half of it went to somebody else, which had nothing to do with it. The money came in through the LRC. It sits over on one side, and all the grant money is sitting in an account strictly to allow us to spend it for this district. There is no mixing.
Okay.
So now let's get back to the process of approving the budget. We have a budget that I believe that we approved back in November, where we're looking at $561,000 of total spending. Mike, do we have to, I'm getting confused as to this budget process. Do we still have the authority to spend that money?
When we had an estimate of 500 and some $1,000. The way the money is actually being spent is up to $500,000 being spent through the JCA. And our preference is that that money is spent first because it, goes away on June 30. And then any more money that would need to be spent or any specific line item that we would want to use our budget for, this budget gives us the authority to do that. Does that make sense? You're right that the expenditure estimate was 500 and some thousand. The money being expended is coming from two different entities to support 100,000.
But our total budget for the year is still the November balance of 561,800.
No.
I actually think it's even more than that, if I remember right. But.
Well, not your adopted approved budget that this board has the authority to spend.
Right, and that's why, Eric, I continue to say our estimate of expenditures, it is not the official budget of this district, because a good portion of that, whatever that expenditure estimate was, actually the appropriation authority sits with the JCA for the 500,000. Or appropriation authority, if this is adopted, will be 162
and change.
Yeah. So it is confusing, but because of the grant agreement, the contract with the state of Oregon, only the JCA can spend that 500,000.
Okay. So let me ask a couple of questions in that regard. When we last looked at this, the budget for the utility rate development was $85,000. Now, this document says we're budgeting 45. Is the other 40 coming from the JCA?
That's correct.
Okay, so got it. So
it may be helpful, Peggotty, Colin, Casey, it may be helpful for this board to be able to see both budgets side by side. It is understandably
it's challenging,
difficult to see the whole picture when we only are going to officially adopt 162 and change in our budget, and yet the bulk of our expected expenditures are coming from another budget. So
could I ask a question? Because I may be,
of course, Mary Helen.
I may be the only non-accountant in the room. So
I don't think that's true.
I want to claim that. Anyway, so I can follow your explanations. My concern, or what I think I would like to know, is how those budget items that Casey just read off, because I didn't print them. But I think there was one for community engagement and then one for mission, vision, values. How did those get arrived? What is that? I mean, you $1,000 do community engagement, or is there a way to explain to the people how I'm spending their money besides somebody behind a curtain decided that we needed to spend 15,000, but what if it only costs 10,000? Or how is that an impossible task to, because to Eric's question of where the money's coming from, I had that same thing. I didn't have the same figures in my head, but splitting it between 40,000, 45,000, is that, I don't know what else to call it. Does that make sense? I mean, it's like, how did we arrive at those figures, and how can I vote to accept a budget when I don't know who decided that that money was going to be spent in a certain way?
So we did have a conversation about this back in November.
Okay, I probably missed that one.
There was an overall expenditure estimate for what we were going to try to accomplish this year. And that included outreach, and it included the mission, vision, values. It included the revenue model. It included a lot of administrative issues for us to get started. All of those issues were accounted for. What I'm suggesting is it would be better for the board to be able to see all of that in one place, realizing that the technical exercise here is to adopt a supplemental budget for just the $162,000 side of this equation. The other side sits in the JCA budget. And so that's why I'm just suggesting that the board.
We will do that. I think it'll make it easier to have that all out in front of you at one time. And I apologize that we did not, because I do think it's easy.
So I want folks to continue to be able to ask questions, but procedurally, it seems to me, Casey, what I'd like to do today is open a public hearing on what's in front of the group today. We can have more discussion, that's fine, but I'd like to make sure we get through the open a hearing, allow anybody to comment that they want, close the hearing, and then I guess under the board's deliberation, we could extend this to their next meeting for a vote. Is that correct?
You'd do that, certainly. Whether you'd have to have another, whether you would need another hearing at the next meeting, I don't know, but I will talk with Kelly and Hong to figure that out between now and then.
The other thing we could do, I believe also, is keep the hearing open.
This is true.
Not close it till the next meeting. So, but for now, other questions or comments on what we have before us so that we can make sure your questions can get answered for our next meeting.
My other question was, if money needs to be shifted from one budget item to another, like one's going to be, does that take a whole bunch of hearing, or does whoever, is it different for the JCA than the 162,000? So let's say you need more money to do something and you aren't going to use it in another budget item. Is that a complicated process?
No, the board doesn't have to deal with that.
Okay.
In setting the appropriation, which is the full $162,000, you can spend up to that much can be spent in the fiscal year. Now, if it's not spent the way the board said it wanted to be spent, and you hadn't talked to the board and kind of gotten their nod on it, then there could be hell to pay between the board and the staff. But technically, the agency has the authority to spend the full $162,000 on appropriate things.
Okay, because my short experience with foundation and dealing with the city. If you don't say the words in the right way, they won't give you the money. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how to best, Mike can kind of,
I think yeah, it's a relevant concern, Mary Helen, but as Casey has noted, this
we're okay.
this particular appropriation that we are hopefully going to eventually approve is just a one number, and we have flexibility within that
Good.
number to expend money.
Okay.
Actually, with that, I've got just a point of clarification to make sure that we're all on the same page here. We've got a $500,000 budget, a little bit more than that, I believe. Well, $500,000 that is from the state and that goes away midnight, June 30th. And then we have this $162,000. So I presume that but this money could be banked if we don't need it before June 30th. And that's the order in which I presume Peggotty is working. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Tanny, did you want to comment, Tanny?
Yeah, just with the discussion that's gone on, I would recommend that we table this item if possible until the next meeting.
Yeah, that's generally my intent. I want to make sure people can get questions out so the staff can address those questions. Even if we can't do it today, we can get questions addressed. I would like to open the public hearing, and then we can keep it open and close it at the next meeting. And then hopefully everybody's questions can get answered. We can see both budgets side by side so we can match them up with what our discussion was back in November. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah. Okay. With that, go ahead, Shirley.
Well, what impact does this have on the work staff are doing? Is there is a timely decision? Do we need to make that decision today so staff can go about the work that they plan?
No, I believe we will be fine until the next meeting. Because the biggest concern is you can't spend it if you don't have it, so.
Well, the appropriation in the JCA is approved.
Right.
And that's for up to 500,000. I think, this is just my opinion, we may have a hard time even spending all of that money this fiscal year. So I don't think we will have a timing problem, Shirley, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Okay.
My only concern, Mike, is if there are items that
Right.
we need to spend money on that are not covered by that grant, those are the things we want to address. But other than that, you're correct.
Okay. And because of this is a special meeting, when is our next one? Remind me.
The 15th.
March 15th?
Yes.
So we got about 2 weeks of wiggle room here, Shirley. And at least.
So I guess the question is, what is it we can't, what do we need to, how will the 2 weeks give us help with this discussion? What will happen between now and then?
From what I've heard so far today, Shirley, at least some members of the board would like to be able to see both budgets side by side so you can get a sense of the total appropriation and kind of the line items of what we expect to spend the money in. Even though we have flexibility, we had a pretty extensive discussion last November about kind of what the budget committee had recommended for all the expenditures, which I think is now at over $600,000. So that's why the 2 weeks are, I think, needed to make sure there's enough clarity for everyone so they feel comfortable with the vote for the supplemental budget.
Mike, I'm one of the ones that had the questions, but I'm perfectly fine adopting the budget and finding it out later because end result, that's going to happen anyway. I mean, so.
Well, I appreciate that, Mary Helen. I really do. but I think it's probably just better procedurally if everybody, all 17 members have that information in front of them and feel comfortable. I'd rather give everybody as much comfort as they can about it than have us maybe have a split vote on this. I'd really rather us hang together if we can. And I don't think there'll be a problem with the two week delay on the final vote.
I think we're fine.
So any other questions or comments before I open this public hearing? Okay, then I'd like to open a public hearing on the 2020-2021 supplemental budget. And is there any testimony? Hearing none, I'd like to continue the hearing to our next meeting, which is scheduled for March the 15th. And I think we start at 3 o'clock that day. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, so we will continue this hearing through then and get everybody both of those budgets so you can see them side by side, and we can have a discussion about that, and hopefully be comfortable enough to adopt this supplemental budget for the district. Okay. What's next, Emily?
You get me again.
It's you again.
I hope I do better on this one, but I'm not asking for a vote on this one today. Several of us, with some help from smarter people from outside, have drafted a set of financial policies driven in large part by a requirement in local budget law that says in your proposed budget, you have to refer to the financial policies. So that implies that you have adopted some. We didn't need to do this last year because you just started out, but we should have some policies in place. We have drafted a series of policies in 7 areas, fewer than often happens with local governments. And these are geared for the interim nature of the interim board. It doesn't have, for example, such things as planning reserve levels and how much of your budget you're going to spend that come with a full service agency. Your charge is limited and your time period is limited. So we didn't include some things that you often do include. What these policies are geared for is less a manual for how to do something than it is establishing some basic tenets that the board says the district will observe. Those include essentially saying we will follow best practices, we will follow the laws and regulations. And what these do is try to do that. In annual budgeting, it says we'll adopt a balanced budget and comply with all laws and regulations governing budget, local budgeting in Oregon, saying that we will have a program-based budget and directing the chief financial officer to prepare and submit program performance monitoring and measurement guidelines for board approval next year. Monitor and review budget performance quarterly, and a couple of those things you can see. Public participation and promote equity and social justice. That's just dealing with the budget. Thank you. Those are there. We can, I hope, move on. Thank you. Debt management, we'll adhere to the terms of any debt we have, and we'll observe necessary requirements. In the full text of this, there is a reference that the district will strive to structure any debt agreement in this interim period to defer any payment of debt principal, interest, and fees until a permanent revenue stream is in place, because you're going to have trouble finding the money to repay it if you don't have your revenue stream in place. There's an investment policy that says excess funds will be invested with the state of Oregon's local government investment pool, as we do with the districts, as many, if not most, local governments do. Accounting and Financial Reporting will prepare a consolidated annual financial report. And we will note that the district operates on the modified accrual basis of accounting, saying what accounting system structure you have is a requirement in state law. Internal controls, this directs the CFO to develop a set of internal controls for board to review later. And in procurement, you're basically saying you'll follow public contracting code and guidelines, including adoption of local contract review board rules, which you have done today. I put these out here, we put these out here today as an introduction, and give you some time to think about it, ask some questions, and we'll bring them back either next month if there's not really any issue with any of them, or next month and the following month, but we hope to have them approved before the budget is approved and sent to TSCC, and certainly before the budget is adopted in June. Any questions, concerns?
Questions of Casey at this time? And go ahead, Peggy.
There will be more detail. We just wanted to get this out in front of people for this meeting, just to let you know. We're gonna present these very similar that we went through with the bylaws with more detail as we move forward. But we just want to get these front and center as we go forward.
Okay. We got the full text in our packet, did we not?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Page and a half.
Okay. So I just would suggest everybody take time to go over those and we can continue this conversation at our next meeting, at least an agenda item for it, so that ask questions and have a conversation about it. This is a fairly limited scope for financial policies for, let's just say, a mature local government. But we're not there yet on the maturity scale. And so trying to get some very basic things in some fundamental categories in place makes a lot of sense for us going before we get into our next fiscal year. So thank you, Casey, for.
Thank you. And we'd also like to have the new CFO be able to take a look and put his stamp on these, and he's not here yet.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, we've got about 9 minutes left. Peggy?
Yes. First, I just want to reiterate what Mike said. I want to thank you all for sneaking this into your busy calendars for this month to at least get an hour in, and we've been able to reduce that second meeting. We originally thought we'd need 3 hours, and we've reduced that to 2, so that's a good thing. I just want to give you a couple of overviews. One, as we start to move into the budget season, we'll be providing more information, but our priorities at this point is recognizing the revenue development model, the equity committee, the environmental committee, community outreach, and ongoing administration. So that's where our focus is. We did hire a CFO. I'm very, very excited. His name is William, but he goes by Nick Hogan. He is currently working at the Estacada School District. He has over 20 years of public sector accounting and finance, which is going to be really helpful for us and especially with this new district. He's also been a city manager in Stevenson, Washington, and was CFO for Hood River School District. And when he worked there, had experience working with GO bonds and other funding mechanisms. So he brings a wealth of information. We anticipate he'll be here. He's under contract, and so with Estacada, he is planning his first day to be with our new district on April 5th. Next up, the executive director position that closed last night, and we have over 30 applicants. I want to remind you that the executive director Committee is Michael Jordan, Mary Helen, Bob Salinger, and Ann Gravitt. And MCDD representatives include Ken Anderton, Nancy Hendrickson, and myself. And they're scheduled for rounds of interviews. The first round of interviews are March 17th and 18th. And the second round will be March 31st. We are also wanting to have an opportunity for MCDD staff and the deputy directors to have a conversation with the final candidates the first part of April. Next, any questions on that? Okay, next. I don't know if Evan is on the phone, on the call, but I did want to let you know, Senate Bill 622, which is the $10 million of lottery fund bonds to support districts in the state of Oregon, with 60% going toward the rural communities. I want to thank Councilor Craddock. She did an excellent job providing testimony for that bill, as well as Lou Fredericks and Mark Landauer also involved, as well as drainage district representatives across the state. So we are hoping to have it move to Ways and Means probably in May. Another thing I want to let you know, we have a meeting with the Speaker's office on Friday of this week. That includes Mike Jordan, myself, Colin Rowan, and Mark Landauer, to talk about our $2 million ask for this district for next biennium. And in addition, we have a meeting scheduled March 10th with Chris Cummings, who's the director of Business Oregon, to ask for, as we were all talking about, that $500,000 grant, to see if there is some wiggle room on if it absolutely cuts off at the end of June, with the thought that, number one, the district was not able to form until April, May of last year. And then number two, we lost a couple months when it was uncertain with COVID. We didn't want to spend against that because we didn't know if that money was actually going to come to fruition. So we are asking for a little bit of wiggle room for that spending. Then also there was a conversation at our last board meeting regarding the environmental concerns and issues, as we talked about the feasibility study. And there is a meeting scheduled with March 12th with Kevin Bryce from the Corps, Mike Jordan, myself, and Bob Salinger, to kind of walk through and discuss some of the environmental comments that came up during that feasibility study. So that's my summary, and you still have 3 minutes.
I have one quick question.
Yes.
Have you talked to the city about the houseless project?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
I've talked to, we actually sent that letter over. We've also had a conversation with the mayor's office on some issues, and also sent the letter that we sent to city council, also went to Commissioner Jayapal.
Okay, was it before or after Sam Adams got on board?
I called Sam Adams. I didn't get a call back.
I'll tell him, because I was bugging him about it. So, okay.
But he don't copy the letter. I will say that. So we directly copied him on it.
Can you describe what you mean, the houseless issue? Is it a complaint that is being made? Is that what the point is? Or?
I'll tell you, we have had a tremendous challenge, like many others that are doing work in the region, is we've had some real challenges with the houseless community. We had one of our employees be confronted with an individual with a gun. We haven't been able to get access to a number of our pump stations because of vehicles, etc. There's being damage done to the levee system itself. And so we reached out to City Council. It was not a letter of complaint. It was a reach out to look for ways that we can collaborate to manage and mitigate the concerns and the constraints it's put on our staff. I will not send any of staff out alone to any site because of safety concerns. So we are working with the city on, and we have done, just for general information, I'm not sure you're aware, but MCDD has had a contract with Cascadia Health for a number of years to work to reach out to the houseless community that's within the district. But this last year has been pretty overwhelming.
Okay, we're just about at time. Emily, has anybody come on to the call that wants to address the board?
I haven't seen anyone new that hasn't already gotten an opportunity.
Okay, great. Anything else good of the order today, gang? So I'll see you all in 2 weeks. And once again, thank you for making the extra time. Really appreciate it. And it, as you could tell, helped us make some progress on some issues that we need to keep moving on. So anyway, have a good evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you.